Have you been struggling with validation rules for so long? If yes, then don't worry. I'm here to help you out. Let's have a quick overview on validation rules and let's see what they are, how they are created, and what points do you need to consider with validation rules. So let's begin. Let's begin with what validation rules do. Validation rules verifies the data a user enters in a record to meet the organization's standard. Okay. So to explain it to you, I'll take a simple example. You must have come across certain situations in which you want to control the data which your users enter to save a record, and that situations might be like you want every opportunity's amount to be greater than 10,000. You don't want any opportunity to be created in your Salesforce org where the amount is less than 10,000. So in that situation, you'll create a validation rule. Okay, let me take another example. Imagine your user is creating a lead record or editing an existing lead record and entering an email address in the email field. What you want is that whenever email is entered into the lead record, there should be phone number also. Otherwise, email should not be entered. Yeah, there can be a situation like that. So in that situation also, you'll create validation rules. Okay, let me take another example. There's a situation when a user is creating an account record and the ownership is public. So in that situation, what you want is the annual revenues field should also be populated. Otherwise, the record should not be created. I mean, should not be. I'm not saying that should not be created. I mean, should not get saved basically. And and if it is private, then annual revenue can be left blank or whatever the value it is. But if the ownership of account record is public, in that situation, you want the annual revenue field to be populated. So in that situation also, you'll create a validation rule. Okay, now let me explain you that what validation rule is and what it consists of. Validation rule is basically a simple rule which gets evaluated or executed whenever a record gets saved. Like record gets saved when you are creating it and when you are editing it. So whenever you are saving that record or clicking on that save button, the validation rule on that particular object gets executed. And validation rule only consists of two things. First, formula or an expression which gets evaluated, and this formula or expression returns one of the two values, true or false. And if this formula or expression returns a true value, in that situation an error message gets displayed and the record doesn't get saved. But if this formula or expression evaluates to false, in that situation the record will get saved. So what you need to do is, in order to control the data which your users entering to meet your which your users are entering to create a record or to enter into that record, to create a record or to basically edit that record and entering that particular information, and you want the data should be there should be quality data, and you want that data should meet your organization standards. So in that situation, you are creating validation rules. So in that validation rule, you'll simply write down a formula which will evaluate whenever a user is saving that record, and that evaluation should be like that formula or the expression should be created in a way that if this formula gets true, gets the value true or returns the value true, then in that situation an error will be displayed and the record will not get saved. And if that formula or expression evaluates to false, then in that situation only the record gets saved. So this is what the flow of validation rule is, and this is what it consists of, and it is basically created to keep your data or maintain the data quality in your org, and to want your users to enter the information that meets your organization's standard. And yes, you can create as many validation rules as you want on a single object. If you have created 3 or 5 validation rules on a single object, they'll be evaluated one by one after another, and in whichever validation rules the formula evaluates to true, then in that situation an error will be displayed to the user who is trying to save that record, and he'll not be able to save that record until that problem gets solved. And if all the validation rules, we are taking an example of 5, if all the 5 validation rules gets evaluated and returns a value 5, then in that situation the record will get saved. Now to explain you that how we will create a validation rule in our Salesforce org, I'll take 2 simple examples, and that are: the first one, every opportunity record should have the amount field's value greater than 10,000. Let's go and create it. Alright, so we actually need to create the validation rule on opportunity objects. So we need to go to the opportunity object using setup, and from setup we'll go to object manager, and over here you can see opportunity object. Here are the validation rules. Create new. You need to check this active box if you want this validation rule to be active, and if in any case you want a record to be created without this validation rule, or if you, in any case if you want this validation rule to be disabled, then you can simply edit it and like uncheck this active checkbox and make it disabled. Yeah, and over here you can write down the description, and here is the place where you have to write down the formula or the expression which if evaluate to true will throw an error, and which if if it is evaluated as false, then in that situation the record will get saved. So I'll insert the field on opportunity object. I want amount. Yes, here is the amount field. I'll insert it. I don't have to write anything, and I'll insert the operator. I want this to be less than 10,000. Okay, you must be wondering that why I have put placed less than, because if amount is less than 10,000, only that in that situation I want to throw the error, not the opposite. So I'll set it as 10,000 and click on check syntax. No errors found, and here I have to write down the error message. Amount should be greater than 10,000, and I want to show it on a field. If you want to show it on top of the page, you can show it, but there's a little convention over here that if this validation rule involves only a single field, then in that situation you should prefer to show it after that field only, and if there are more than one fields involved, then show it on the top of the page. Click on save. Now we'll go to create an opportunity record, and I'll set the amount as 8,000, and that is less than 10,000. Yeah, and I'll set the first ops and the close date as 8 and stage as prospecting, and that's it. Save. Okay, review the errors on this page. Amount should be greater than 10,000. So this is how validation rules work. But if I'll change it to 10,000, or let's say more than 10,000, then in that situation, the record will get saved. That seems so simple. Validation rules are very easy, huh? Don't underestimate validation rules. Let's create the second validation rule a little complex. So the requirement is that whenever a user is creating an account record or editing an account record, and the ownership of that account is public, then in that situation annual revenue field should not be empty and always be greater than 0. This is what you have to do. Now let's again go and create a validation rule. So let's create the complex validation rule now. We'll again go to setup and then to the object manager. And in the object manager we'll go to account. Over here we'll go to validation rules, click on new, annual revenue check, and here we'll write down the expression which you want to check. And for that what I'll do is first we need to check that the ownership field is equals to public or not. So for that I'll use if function, and it's not a condition over here, conditional statement or something like that. It's basically a function, and here you can see the function menu where you can find many functions which you can use in validation rule, which will help you out to create whatever validation you want to create, like to meet your organization standard for the data. So initially on the very first note we'll use if condition, and if you want to know that what all conditions are, then you just have to click on that particular function, and here you'll find out that it's this function's information. And if you want to know more about all of these functions, then here's the link. I would highly recommend you to check out this link so that you can learn how to handle the complex validation rules. So here we have used a function. It like takes 3 arguments. First is the logical test, then value if true, then value if false. So in logical test we just have to provide the logical test that we want to perform for this if condition, and over here we want to check that ownership is equals to public or not. So I'll click on ownership and then insert operator equal and then public, like this. And over here I have to write down the value if true. So if the value is like, if ownership is equals to public, then what I want is that annual revenue. Yeah, annual revenue. Why I'm forgetting? Annual revenue, where it is not equals to, which is like this, null. And if it is not equals to null, or let's say it's equals to null, then in that situation it should return a value. Annual revenue is equals to null, then it should return a value, return a true value, and it will, if it will return a true value, then the error will be displayed, otherwise not. And if ownership is not public, then we'll simply pass false, because we don't want any error to be displayed, we want the record to get saved. So we have passed false over here. And now I'll click on check syntax. Before clicking on check syntax, let me tell you that there's something weird gonna happen over here, and let's see what it is. Oh, field ownership is a pickless field. Pickless fields are not only supported, are only supported in certain functions. Okay, so let me tell you, pickless fields cannot be matched, or their values cannot be matched using equals to operator. We need some special functions for that, and that special function is pickval. Okay, I'll insert the selected function over here. This is the actual function. It takes 2 arguments. One is the pickless field and another one is the text literal. What this function does is that whatever pickless field you are passing and whatever text literal you are passing, it just matches that is this pickless field's value is this text literal or not. And if it is this text literal, then it returns true, otherwise it returns false. So in our situation, I'll copy ownership into the pickless field, and in the text literal, I'll copy public, like this, and I'll remove equals to from here, and I'll cut and paste it as a first argument. Perfect. And now if this is if this condition is true, then this should evaluate. But let me tell you one thing more. There is a function called is null also. So you can use that function to check whether the annual revenue is null or not. So I just have to pass annual revenue into this function like this. And I'll copy this and paste it over here. So if ownership is equals to public and annual revenue is null, then in that situation it will return true and the error message will be displayed. Otherwise, if ownership is not public, then it will return false, record will get saved. If ownership is public and it is not equals to null, then it will return false and the record will get saved. There will be no error message shown over there. Okay, like this. So I've created a validation rule with here's the formula, here's the error, and the error location I want to set it as top of the page because there are more than one fields involved. It's just a convention, there's no compulsion to follow it, but it's totally up to you. Click on save. Now I'll go to my account object and I'll create a new account record, and I'll set the name and all those things as whatever I want to, like name, account valid check. Yeah, and I'll set the ownership as public and annual revenue is null. I'll save. Oh, review these errors on this page. Annual revenue cannot be null for public companies. Okay. Let's see what happens when I set it as private. Save. Oh, the records gets created successfully. Now let's create another account record. Account valid2 and set the ownership as public and set the annual revenue as whatever you want and save. Oh, account is created. This is how you basically create some complex validation rules. Wasn't that so easy? Actually, yes. But still there are some points that you need to consider with validation rules. So the first point. Validation rules gets evaluated irrespective of the medium from which you are creating the records. Yes. It doesn't matter, means that if you have created the validation rule from Salesforce Classic or Salesforce Lightning, these will work only when you are creating the records from Salesforce Classic or Lightning. These will work even if you are creating the records or editing the records from Salesforce 1 or from the APIs or from any external application that has the integration with your Salesforce. Validation rules works everywhere. These are basically the layers on your database. Whichever record will go into your database, it needs to pass validation rules. It doesn't matter that they are coming from Salesforce Classic, Salesforce Lightning, Salesforce 1 or from any other medium. It needs to pass from these validation rules, and if it doesn't, then the error gets displayed on the platform from which we are creating the records. The second point. When one validation rule fails, Salesforce continues to check all the validation rules on that object and displays all the error messages at once. Yes, imagine you have 5 validation rules on a single object. When you're creating that, when you're creating a record of that particular object, let's suppose that it has checked the first validation rule and it is checking now the second validation rule. If there is an error, then it doesn't happen that the third, fourth and fifth validation rules will not be checked. They'll also be checked on that same pass or in that same situation only, and all of the error messages that will come from second till fifth or whatever the number of validation rules are on that particular object, and whatever errors you are facing from those validation rules, all of those errors will be shown at once. It will not be like that now you have to pass the second validation rule, now you will get the error of fourth validation rule or fifth validation rules. They run at a whole, how many of they are on a particular object. And one more point. Whenever you need to create some records or import your data that can violate the validation rules which you have created, in that situation you don't actually have to delete the validation rule. You can just deactivate it using the checkbox, like just uncheck that active checkbox on that validation rule and it will be deactivated. Ready to go. What else? This is over. Hit the subscribe button now with the notification bell icon so you'll be the first one to get notified whenever a new video gets uploaded on this Salesforce Hulk channel. And on this Salesforce Hulk channel, I create and upload a video every week. And if you're watching this video on Facebook or LinkedIn, there's a link down in the description. Just hit that link, go to the YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button to watch me every week and learn from me. Yeah, just hit the subscribe now. It's free. What are you waiting for? See you next week. And then, bye-bye. Take care.